Picture this. You're 17, you've probably just learned to drive. Maybe you're trying to impress someone in your high school geometry class. The biggest thing you're worried about is passing your finals or saving up for your first junk car. Now imagine instead you're crawling through the volcanic ash of Iwo Jima with bullets zipping over your helmet, grenades bouncing at your feet, and you make the split-second decision to jump on not one, but 2 live grenades for your friends, fully expecting to die. Then, plot twist, you don't die. Congratulations, you're Jack Lucas. This isn't some tall tale of a comic book. This is the real story of a kid, literally a kid, who became the youngest Marine ever awarded the Medal of Honor. A story so ridiculous, if Hollywood wrote it, you'd probably laugh it off as too far-fetched. So buckle up, because it's about to get insane. Jacqueline Harold Lucas was born on Valentine's Day, February 14, 1928, in Plymouth, North Carolina. Cute, right? Little heartbreaker from day one. But life didn't waste any time toughening him up. His father died when Jack was still young, leaving his mother to raise him and his siblings on her own. Eventually, she decided the best shot he had was discipline. So she sent him to Edwards Military Institute, a military prep school. Bad idea if your kid's already a hard charger. By age 13, Jack was built like a bulldog. He was short, eventually topping out at about 5'8", but stocky as hell. He spent his childhood hunting, boxing, lifting anything heavy he could find, and basically living like he was prepping for combat before puberty finished. And Jack had one obsession, the United States Marine Corps. Maybe it was hearing stories from the old World War I vets around town, or seeing those sharp-dressed blues. Whatever it was, Jack decided he wasn't going to wait until he was old enough. Nope, life was happening now. So at 14 years old, Jack Lucas walked into a Marine recruiting office, lied about his age, and signed the papers. He literally forged his mother's signature. He also probably deepened his voice and tried to stand on his tiptoes. And you know what? It worked. Different era, different paperwork standards. The recruiter was like, "Looks like a solid farm kid, sign him up." Jack shipped off to Parris Island, South Carolina to begin boot camp. Think about that, 14. Most kids at 14 are worried about acne and voice cracks. Jack was getting screamed at by drill instructors, learning to field strip a Garand, and bayoneting straw dummies. He made it through boot, graduated, and was officially a Marine private. Not bad for someone who should have been finishing middle school. They shipped him off to Hawaii, where he was assigned as a truck driver and a heavy equipment operator, which Jack hated. He wanted combat, not steering a supply truck, and he started getting into fights about it, literally. If there's one thing Jack couldn't stand, it was being told to sit quietly on the sidelines. Eventually, the Corps found out he was underage. His mom had written the Marines a letter saying basically, "Hey, pretty sure my son is missing. Last I heard, he's a Marine." Oops. They pulled Jack out of the combat rotation and stuck him behind the wire, but didn't discharge him outright. Maybe they knew there was something different about this kid. So Jack did what any reasonable 14 to 17-year-old psycho would do. He went AWOL. He packed up his gear, walked off base, and basically hitchhiked his way back to the war. He slipped onto a transport ship that was loading up Marines destined for Iwo Jima, stowed away in the dark corners of the hold, surviving on stolen rations. By the time he popped up and turned himself in, the ship was too far out to sea. They could have court-martialed him. Instead, looking at this eager, muscle-bound kid grinning at them, they handed him a rifle and said, "All right, Lucas, you're in." He was placed with the 1st Battalion, 26th Marines, 5th Marine Division. No more trucks, no more Hawaii. It was about to get very, very real. February 19, 1945, D-Day for Iwo Jima. If hell had a beachfront property, it would have looked like this. Black volcanic ash that swallowed your boots, Japanese machine guns dug deep into the island's rock, firing down on landing craft, mortars crumped everywhere. Marines were dying by the hundreds just trying to move 10 feet inland. Jack Lucas hit the sand with the rest of his unit and started pushing forward. The Marines were tasked with clearing out heavily fortified positions, bunkers, caves, spider holes, filled with Japanese soldiers who would rather die than surrender. For days they clawed forward, inch by bloody inch. Lucas didn't care. He was finally in the fight. He was carrying an M1 Garand, 9 pounds of American hardwood and steel. In his words, he just kept moving. There was nowhere safe anyway. 4 days into the operation, Jack's squad was on patrol through a ravine. They were clearing out enemy positions when they rounded a bend and ran straight into a group of Japanese soldiers. The firefight was instant. Rifles cracked, grenades were thrown by both sides. Jack was firing his Garand from the hip, yelling at his buddies to spread out, when he spotted 2 grenades landing right in front of him. He had maybe a second to react. Without thinking, seriously without thinking, Jack Lucas screamed a warning and dove on the first grenade, shoving it under his body. Then he saw the second grenade rolling nearby, so he grabbed it with his hand and pulled it under him too. This is the moment most people would call suicidal. Jack called it doing my job. The grenades exploded beneath him in a deafening concussion blast. Dirt, smoke, and bits of Jack went flying. His squad hit the ground, certain he was dead. The squad moved back in cautiously, probably to recover what they assumed was left of Jack. Instead, they found him still alive, half conscious, bleeding from dozens of wounds, but somehow gripping onto life like the stubborn little pit bull he's always been. Medics rushed in, carried him out under fire. Jack drifted in and out of consciousness, thinking he was dead already. The corpsmen didn't exactly help. Apparently, one of them literally said, "This kid's a goner," right over him, to which Jack supposedly tried to mumble, "Like hell I am." They got him back to the beach, pumped him full of morphine, and loaded him on a hospital ship. Over the next months, Jack Lucas underwent 21 surgeries. Doctor pulled out roughly 250 pieces of metal. Not all of it came out. Around 200 fragments stayed embedded in his body for life. Little souvenirs from the Japanese army, I guess. Back in the States, word spread fast about the teenage Marine who had jumped on 2 grenades and somehow lived. Reporters couldn't believe it. Generals couldn't believe it. Even President Truman reportedly read the citation twice. At 17 years old, Jack Lucas was brought to the White House. There in the Rose Garden, President Harry S. Truman hung the Medal of Honor around his neck. The citation was almost as long as Jack's service record by that point, detailing extraordinary heroism and self-sacrifice above and beyond the call of duty. Photos from that day show a kid who looks impossibly young for the medal on his chest. Barely shaving, hair slicked back, standing ramrod straight with a grin like he'd just pulled off the ultimate prank of death. When asked later how he felt, Jack simply said, "I did my duty. I protected my buddies." That's what you're supposed to do. Now you'd think after dodging death in a spectacular way at 17, Jack would kick back and retire on a farm, smoke cigars, and tell war stories to kids on his porch. Not exactly. Jack's life after the war was almost as chaotic. He struggled with nightmares, pain from shrapnel still inside him, and the general weirdness of being famous in an age when most people are trying to figure out how to get into college. He married 5 times. He once joked that surviving 2 grenades didn't prepare him for surviving multiple wives. Jack tried civilian jobs, but that itch for action was always there. So in the early 1960s, he did something completely bananas. He enlisted again, this time in the U.S. Army. Said he wanted to show the next generation how it was done. Jumped right into airborne school. During a parachute jump, Jack's parachute failed to deploy. For most people, that would be it, game over. But Jack somehow tangled with another jumper midair. They crashed to the ground together and both survived. Doctors were stunned. The man had metal in his body from Iwo Jima and now just added a failed skydive to his "this should have killed me" resume. Friends joked he was unkillable. Jack would just grin and say, "Grenades didn't work, airplanes didn't work. Cancer's gonna have to try real hard." In his later years, Jack Lucas dedicated himself to talking with young Marines and soldiers, telling them his story, not to brag, but to explain what real brotherhood meant. How when the time comes, you protect your buddies, no matter what it costs. He received countless honors from veterans groups, spoke at schools, and kept up with the Corps for the rest of his life. The shrapnel still inside him would set off airport metal detectors, to which he'd laugh and pull out his Medal of Honor to explain. Jack Lucas died of leukemia in 2008 at the age of 80. He was buried with full military honors at Arlington National Cemetery, surrounded by Marines who knew exactly whose grave they were lowering into the ground. Statues, schools, and VFW posts bear his name. His story is still told to new recruits at boot camp as an example of extraordinary courage, because honestly, there just aren't many better examples. Jack Lucas wasn't some superhuman. He was a stocky, stubborn farm kid who loved the Marines so much he lied his way in at 14. Who loved his brothers in arms so much he didn't hesitate to sacrifice himself for them, twice on the same day. That's what makes his story stand out. Not the Medal of Honor, or the photos with presidents, or the statues, but the simple truth. When the absolute worst moment came, Jack Lucas didn't think twice. He dove on the grenade. That's why Marines still tell his story decades later. Because in the end, that's the standard. Would you do the same for the guy next to you? Jack didn't have to wonder. He already answered. If you enjoyed this story of Jack Lucas, the teenage Marine who jumped on grenades and lived, we've got plenty more just like it on this channel. Medal of Honor stories, unsung heroes, and the kind of battlefield legends Hollywood wished they could invent. So hit that subscribe button, like the video, and drop a comment about who we should cover next. And remember, somewhere out there is probably another Jack Lucas. Let's hope we never have to find out. I'm Dave Newton. Subscribe for more amazing military history.